we did not get sober to be squares, like we got sober to like get our life back and then to live our life, right? It wasn't meant to be boring. And I think there is this perception that like, you can't be sober and go to school, but that's not my belief. And that's not my experience. Like I was able to go back to school, have this support in place, and then graduate.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Henry's Uncle podcast. Today's guest is Sophie, and her journey to recovery is remarkable. Sophie talks about her erratic upbringing in Asia and Australia, which led to alcohol and drug abuse. She discusses everything from getting sober in South Africa to her relapse at USC and how she found supportive sober college housing to help her graduate, and how she now owns her own recovery housing, Academics Anonymous, to help other college students achieve their dreams. Take a listen. Welcome back, everyone. Today we have Sophie Pyne. Really excited. We met actually going on almost 2 years now, right before COVID hit, at a lecture addiction forum at USC. And so that's how we met. So yeah, please go ahead and introduce yourself, Sophie.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Sophie Pyne. I am a USC alum. That's how we met. And I am a person in long-term recovery. I'm also a therapist in private practice here in Los Angeles, the founder of a sober living environment for college students. And what else can I tell you? And I'm an alchemy sound healer now too. So lots has happened since we last saw each other.
You got a lot on your plate, it sounds like.
Yeah, but really amazing things. So I'm so grateful for everything that I get to do, the people that I get to work with. And so it's very fulfilling work for me, definitely.
That's wonderful. So I want to first start, we didn't really get a chance to really talk about, your upbringing, all that stuff, what led to your addiction, all that kind of stuff. So I would love for, to go over that and hear about your story.
So I actually grew up in Hong Kong. I was born in Hong Kong. My mom is from Hong Kong. My dad is English, and I was born there. When I was about 3 years old, we moved to Thailand because of my dad's job. My brother was born there. He's 4 years younger than me. And I would have to say, like, the first kind of, memories that I have as a child were really amazing in Thailand. I grew up in a household where I really had everything, I had a great education. I had friends. We lived in a community of expats where, all the families were doing things together. We would all, go on the same school bus to school. So I had a really great childhood from what I remember when I was there. I was really involved in school. I loved going to school. My mom tells me the first day that she dropped me off at kindergarten, I didn't even look back to say goodbye. I just ran in there and, wanted to be friends with everybody. And so my upbringing was really, really great, really memorable. I was involved in sports. There was a lot to do. We had outdoor areas to go roam around and be children. But I also do remember, as a young girl, there was this side of me that was always curious about different things. I would find myself going into this sort of fantasy world, if you will. And so, looking back, there was always a part of me, I think, that wanted to escape. Even though I had all these amazing things, there was always a part of me that just wanted more of something or wanted to escape and be, somewhere else. And I also remember as a child, I had already started developing behaviors where I would lie about, certain things. I would make up stuff that wasn't really real, but I think looking back now, I wanted to be something that I wasn't, I wanted to be more maybe than because I maybe inside wasn't, totally okay with who I was or didn't even really know who I was. And so although all these things on the outside looked great, I think internally, I always felt like I wasn't enough or I needed more or, there was something missing.
How old were you during this time?
I would say probably from the age of 6, 7, 8, I was already kind of starting to, like make stuff up, kind of like, although I had all these things on the outside, being involved in school, being this star student, having all the friends, like I still remember there were these times as a young child of like wanting to, be something else. And that kind of escalated, I think, at the age of 10. My dad actually moved back to Hong Kong for his job. We were still living in Thailand. I didn't even know that my dad had moved to Hong Kong. I guess part of my story too is my dad, he's an amazing father, but he wasn't always there, and I also remember being really jealous of other kids who had both their parents involved in their, after school activities and because my brother was maybe more of a hands-on child, I do remember times when I would be at, ballet practice and nobody was coming to pick me up, or I would be at soccer games or swimming and everyone else's parents were there, but mine weren't. So I was very independent in that way too. But I think I kind of was, again, whatever I was sort of internally dealing with, I then thought like, oh, I'm not good enough to have my parents here. Or maybe I felt abandoned, or, why don't people show up for me? And, seeing all the parents there.
Yeah, I'm sure that's very hard as a young kid, especially when your parents, you see other, your friends' parents always there, and, mom and dads, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I remember playing, rec basketball, organization up here through high school, and all the parents still came out. And it was just, I know, like similar to my dad, he traveled a lot for my upbringing, but looking back, I never thought of it that way. Just, I know when he was around, he would, as much as possible, try to coach baseball or basketball, whatever it may be. Yeah. So I can sort of relate to that in terms of, having one parent, there, and then the other one's traveling a lot.
Exactly. And I don't think I really realized that. My dad and I are very similar people, now that I'm much older and we have a really solid relationship. But I think I longed for that relationship too. My dad's side of the family, I've learned, later throughout my journey into recovery, does have a lot of addiction and alcoholism within the family. And if my dad is hearing this, I love you, but he probably also, has his own stuff that we've talked about and maybe manifested in different ways, not in terms of his alcohol or substance use, but, maybe in work or other areas. And so, I know my dad was always there. He provided an amazing life for us, but as addicts and alcoholics, what we really crave is connection, right? We really thrive in community, which we'll get to as well. And so, so my dad had moved to Thailand, back to Hong Kong before us. And then we were going to be moving to Hong Kong. And I was about 10 or 11. And, it's that age where you have all your friends, you have your life. And still can remember this. I was so angry that we were going to be moving to Hong Kong because I had built this life. I had all my friends I felt a part of. I was doing well in school, and I felt like he had just ripped me out of, what my comfort zone. And I was so angry having to move there because I was going to have to be the new girl at the new school. I had no friends. And so I think I was about 10 or 11. So I remember moving to Hong Kong, and that's where things really shifted for me. I became really angry, whether it was resentful towards my father or just in general. Like, I was angry inside. I was screaming inside. I gave up my passions, which were ballet. That was a huge passion of mine. I actually dreamt of like going to ballet school and, really having that as like a professional career one day. And I totally gave that up when we moved to Hong Kong. And I just remember being the new girl at school again and just feeling so awkward and not fitting in and not being able to find my people. And it was a challenge, I think, the first year for me to move. We also moved apartments a lot in the beginning as well when we were settling in. So it just felt really chaotic. And again, my dad not being around, he worked a lot. My mom, because my brother was younger and he struggled with actually being bullied a little bit at school as well. Like a lot more attention was on supporting my brother. And so that first year in Hong Kong, honestly, is a little bit of a blur, but I know there was a lot of just adjustment. And then we went to another school, like right after in Hong Kong. And this was like high school, I think, like the beginning of high school. And I was again placed into a class with not my friends that I had made from this school. So having to readjust again. But I started to find my footing. I was always a good student, like I always was able to get good grades. I started participating again in swimming, in athletics. Like I, really started to participate again. But then a year and a half into being in high school, my parents wanted to send me to boarding school. And by that time, I had found my footing. I was considered one of the, more popular girls, if you will. I had my crew of girls that we would run and do stuff, so then once again, I was being pulled out of my comfort zone and sent to this boarding school. And again, bless my parents, my dad grew up in the UK. When he was 6, he was sent to boarding school. So that's just kind of what he knew, that's what you do. So I was sent to an all-girls boarding school in Australia where we don't have a family.
Wow.
We had a lot of family friends who had also maybe put their kids through boarding school. And so off I go. And again, I'm just so mad and so angry and really felt abandoned, why am I going to this boarding school? What did I do wrong? Or why don't you want me to stay at home? I think a lot of those were kind of the thoughts, happening for me.
Did you ever ask your parents, during that time, why? That's a big move.
Yeah, maybe not at the time. I do remember, and it's funny, my mom always had concerns about drug use in Hong Kong in the schools. And, because she had grown up there too, although of course you can find drugs and alcohol anywhere. But I went to one of the English schools. And so there's a lot of expat families there. And she always had concerns about, for whatever reason, drug use. And so I think she wanted, in her mind, putting me in a safe environment. Although I don't really think my mom was the biggest proponent of boarding school. I think it was more my dad, because that was his experience. But I think they really saw me as this independent, strong, young girl who could really do anything she wanted, because that's what I portrayed on the outside, but I think on the inside, I was what is happening? Why am I being sent here? And I remember being there and just the day walking in to this new boarding school, all girls, it was also a Anglican boarding school, and I'm not religious. I have nothing against any religion, but it was all this new stuff again that I was wait, now I've got to fit into this mold, which is not who I am. I was about 12 or 13 by this time. So, that's also a real pivotal age for young people as they're forming their identities, as they're figuring out who they are and navigating the world. And so I think I felt like I was being put into this certain mold that really did not align at all with who I truly am now that I figured that out. And in that year and a half that I was there, things really shifted inside, where I started skipping school a lot and I would hide in the bathrooms. I started smoking cigarettes. We weren't allowed to really interact with the boys from the boys' boarding schools, but I would go there and go watch their, rugby games or whatever it was. And because my holidays were different to the schools in Hong Kong, when I would come back for the holidays, I actually started hanging out with people that had dropped out of high school by that stage. So I had found this new group of people who were kind of the more rebellious, already maybe using and drinking. And so quickly I had found this new like family, if you will, of other students or dropouts in Hong Kong that were using, that were drinking. And I was like, those are my people. That's what I'm going to be doing. And all, I think when I was in Australia at this boarding school too, having gone from being one of the popular girls at my school in Hong Kong, they'd like forgotten about me, when I left. I think we had like MySpace at that time. So like I didn't really stay in communication, right? Like we didn't have, yeah. So it was hard for me to come back, and then like no one would want to like hang out with me, or nobody was asking about. So I always felt, I think I felt rejected. I felt abandoned. I felt like I was missing out. And so I found this new crew of people who were, using and drinking and looked cool. Like it looked cool at the time. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. So I quickly fell into this group of people who, they were probably like 4, 5, 6 years older than me. I was around by now like 12, 13 at the time. And so that's when I started drinking. And we would go, to the rooftop in Hong Kong. It was really easy to buy alcohol. The drinking age there is 18, but as a half white person, if you will, like the police there don't want to mess with you really,
Why is that?
I think that part of it is if you speak really good English and you appear to maybe have like money to be able to get yourself out of situations, they don't really want to mess with you as much, is my experience. And it was so easy to get, fake ID cards. Nobody was really ever like IDing people to go into bars either. Like I remember going to bars at the age of 14, 15. Nobody would ask me. I would go there in my uniform, like right after school, and then change in the bathroom and like be doing homework, like drinking with these like, 50-year-old.
Wow.
Yeah. Super wild. So that kind of became my life. Like I would be in boarding school, for a couple months. I really hated it. I also, at that time, I do remember, and there was a lot of shame with this, like I made up this whole like other life, that was not real. But that's how I escaped what I was really going, what was really happening in my world. And I think I was, always trying to, again, be somebody that I'm not. I wanted to portray this image to either have, people feel sorry for me or whatever it was at the time. I don't even remember, but I do remember just, always lying. Like I was never honest. I was skipping school. I was, using and drinking. I was stealing from my, the girls in my dorm. Like it was just really awful. And I think I was like screaming out for help, like, please, somebody catch me because like I need help. And I didn't know how to say that. I would just be engaging in these behaviors. And at some point I did get caught. So, and it was in this really weird way. So I had this one girlfriend at this boarding school and we had to wear these uniforms that were super ugly. But when you're like, I don't know, 12, 13 and you're like, a young girl and you're like playing at like dress up or fashion shows or whatever. So we took these, what would be considered maybe promiscuous photos with our like school logo in it. And so we got caught because we had put them probably on MySpace. Who knows? And and I remember like that was kind of like the turning point for my parents were like, this is not okay. We know you've been skipping classes. There are already some behaviors they were aware of. And so I don't think I was ever able to say like, hey, this is not working for me. Please take me home. Like I just continued to act out until somebody was like, she needs help. So after a year and a half, I was kind of, in some ways politely asked to leave and go back home. And so I came back to Hong Kong. And again, it was that weird adjustment period for me. now I had these people who were these, high school dropouts that were using and drinking. And so that was my life basically from the age of 14. I probably got back 14 or 15 years old through high school. I had, I would go to school, leave school halfway through. I ended up dating one of the guys who he was a high school dropout and he had his own apartment. So we would all go there and like smoke weed all day and not go to class or drink all day. And so that really just kind of became my life. And yeah, it was really sad. I would forge my mom's signature, to get out of school because you needed a note to leave. Sometimes I would call the school pretending to be my mom to like say I was sick, all the things. I did all the things. And this went on, for a while. And then I was about, I think 15 or 16 when I tried meth, which was really my drug place. Yeah. So there, these older kids that I was hanging out with were already doing like all sorts of things under the, all different types of drugs. And the guy that I was dating was probably 3 or 4 years older than me. Everybody was I was always the baby of the, my friends that I hung out with when I was using and drinking. And I always saw them doing these other drugs and I always wanted to try them. But for a while, I think people were like, no, like just, stick to the weed.
Trying to take care of you.
Yeah, in some nice way, I guess. But I remember trying meth for the first time and I instantly knew in that moment, this is my drug. This is the one.
And why is that?
I think I had just never felt the high that I had felt where like I was totally like, I felt powerful. I felt confident. I felt like I could do anything. I felt like I didn't care about anything else in the world. Like I felt invincible. It had given me this like, high of like, wow, where has this been all my life? And of course, none of it's real, but that's what it gave me. And so I immediately knew that was my drug. And it was a quick downward spiral from there, And
you were 15?
Probably around 15 or 16.
Wow. Okay. And what's like the scene in Hong Kong in terms of the drug culture over there? Is it similar to the US or, is it more strict?
It's interesting. So I don't really know too much about the drinking drug culture here. And I guess that's part of my story too. When I got to the US, I was already 21 and I had a relapse. And so I was drinking and it was really hard for me to find drugs, which I guess I'll get to. But
in Hong Kong or in the US?
In the US.
Okay.
So I don't really know, I'm guessing the culture is probably pretty similar. I do know though, like in China and some other Southeast Asian countries, like the laws are a lot stricter if you get caught, for sure. And I don't think that ever really crossed my mind though, when I was using in Hong Kong, like that was the crazy part. Like, I don't think I ever realized carrying drugs on me. Like, I don't think I really understood the consequences. And I have a lot of friends, now looking back who got in, some real big trouble. And I don't know if it's part of the drugs that I was using where I felt like I was nobody, no one was going to catch me or.
In that age as well, high schoolers, teenagers, we never think anything's going to happen, right?
Right. And I put myself in some really dangerous situations. I mean, I'd carry drugs with me all the time. Actually, the guy I was dating, his apartment got raided one night and we were all, high at the time. And I was like, this is it. I'm going to jail. That was the one time. There have been other times where, we would be out all night because the bars are different, I think, than here in LA. Like they stay open like all 24/7 bars in Hong Kong and clubs in Hong Kong. So I haven't done too much going out to bars and clubs here.
Sure.
But I know there, I would be out literally all night. And then you'd go to the next bar and the next bar and then someone's house. And so it was just like one long night,
And what were your parents? I mean, did your parents know about this, or did you hide it well, or?
Yeah, I think in the beginning I hid it really well. Like I was able for a while to still maintain, and I think this is, part of like the baffling nature of this disease, right? Like I was still able somehow, some way to, for a while, make the outside look okay. I was still able to, or so they thought, go to school. I was still able to get good grades. And I think this also goes to show like addiction really doesn't discriminate, right? Like you could have a great upbringing, you could do really well in school and still struggle with substances. And so I think I was just barely able for a while to keep things together enough where it wasn't drawing attention to me. Like I would still go to swim practice because my mom wanted us to be in swim practice. Like I'd still show up to the bare minimum. And probably for like a year or so, I would say I was able to hide it. But then they started to notice, like, I started becoming like a really angry teenager, and I think some parts too, like maybe they didn't know, like, is Sophie on drugs or is Sophie just a really angry teenager at the time, and I think that's when they were trying to figure it out, probably around 16, 17. When things were kind of still together. But by that time already, I had, been asked to go to counseling by the school. There were some red flags. There was an investigation that happened as well through the school, because this is, I think, by the time we had Facebook, but some of these other students I was hanging out with made a Facebook for the apartment we hung out at,
geez.
and wrote like, I love ketamine on it or something. Like,
yeah.
And so we got, it got to the attention of the schools. It got to the attention of the police. And I remember, oh shit, because I was the girl that was bringing all the drugs to everybody at school and handing them out. I'd become friends with the dealer.
No kidding. Yeah.
I became kind of the in-between. And so like literally my name is highlighted, on every page of this investigation. And of course, being the person I was too, like I was going to take the fall for everybody, There were definitely like situations that popped up, consequences, but I never really like hit bottom, like in high school, if you will. I barely scraped through high school. I was projected to get really good grades, and I had applied to law schools because my dad's a lawyer, and that's what I thought.
Okay. High school to law school immediately.
Yeah, well, it's different in the UK system. So
is it really?
Go straight to law school.
Okay.
Yeah, after high school.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so I'd applied to all these schools in the UK, and it's projected to get all these grades. But of course, by the time I was getting ready to graduate, a lot was falling apart. I had an awful relationship with my mom. She started to know I was lying about everything. I'd always say I was staying at friends' houses, on the weekends, but I think they really knew where I was. But I think they also, my mom being Chinese, and this is a big part of my story too, I think she never wanted to admit that her daughter was a drug addict or an alcoholic. Like in their culture, they see that really as a moral deficiency. And of course, my dad, so at this time too, my brother had already gone to boarding school. So it's just me, my mom, and my dad in the house. So he wasn't really privy to what was going on. Although when he was home for the holidays, like my mom would sometimes lock me out if I wasn't home by curfew. So I'd be calling my brother, like, let me in. My poor brothers had to see me and like really, awfully intoxicated, or had to like drag me through the house but yeah, I think she didn't really want to admit to herself that that's what I was struggling with, So we actually all went to family therapy. I remember at some point we went to counseling, but we never addressed that, like, Sophie may be doing drugs and alcohol. It was more about like, why is Sophie so angry all the time? Why does she always yell at me? It it was more about like that than looking at the underlying, what was happening. And so I didn't have to talk about it. I didn't have to talk about my use at all until I was graduating from high school, barely made it through, really didn't have a relationship with my parents at all, was in this, kind of awful relationship myself too with this guy. And when we graduated, it's like tradition in Hong Kong for everybody to go with their friends to like Thailand or Bali, and your parents pay to basically like celebrate, but really they're just paying your like booze tab, So I end up going to this graduation thing for 2 weeks, just getting like, effed out of my mind. And I come back and I have no motivation to go to college. I didn't get into any of the universities I applied to because my actual grades did not reflect my projected ones, because I'd really thrown everything out the window by that time, And I told my parents I'm going to take a gap year because I needed to like find myself, all these like, they're the best. They really are. Like, I don't know how they put up with all of this, but so in that year though, when I graduated, I moved out with the guy I was dating. And within like 6 months, I had burned all of my bridges with friends. I was an awful human being. I think also when you're using and drinking, of course, you do things that you probably wouldn't do when you're sober. And so I really had just become this girl who was, just intoxicated or high all the time. And I didn't have any real friends. I stayed in relationships that were, had relationships with people that really just wanted, whether it was money, drugs, sex, like that was it, And so within 6 months of graduating high school, this was the end of 2015. No, just kidding. The end of 2009. 2015 was when I graduated USC.
Yeah.
Wow. This was the end of 2009.
Okay.
I remember I was done. I was like, I can't live like this anymore. There was a part of me that was, and I had emailed my mom, and I don't remember this, but she literally has the email, and we've talked about this many times. I'd emailed my mom, or was like on Messenger with my mom, or whatever it was at the time. And I told her, like, I'm in a really dark place. I need help. And that was the first time I had admitted out loud to anybody that like, this is not going okay. I need help.
And so this has been like 6 or 7 years by the time you started using and drinking?
6 or 7 years into it.
Wow.
And I don't think I had really understood what happened, because a lot of my friends, went out, got drunk, and then they just didn't do it the next day. But for me, it was like, I'm up for 3, 4, 5 days. Like, I'm delusional by that point. I even remember, thinking that like my drug dealer, I had this AC unit and we lived on like the 17th floor. I had these thoughts that my drug dealer was hanging out outside my window. I don't know how, and blowing smoke, like, drugs into my room and like just keeping me high. Like they were just crazy, like things like that, Or one time I remember like, I actually thought my mom was an imposter and I wanted her to go and get a test because like I did not, and she had
just freaking out. Jeez.
And there was a point too when I think my mom actually thought she was the crazy one. Like that's how scary it became.
Wow.
She thought she had become the crazy one. And it was a dark place. Like we were all, and it was really a result of my disease that put her to a place where like she had to question her own sanity, So end of 2009, I had said to my mom, like, help. I don't even know where I was. I don't remember where I was, but I think she said, come home. And it was around Christmas time, and I was too ashamed, I think, to like face everybody. I don't think I had seen them since I graduated high school. I'd taken my stuff and moved out. She used to have we had a maid. She used to have our maid follow me sometimes, just out of fear of like not knowing where is Sophie going, And so this was around Christmas time because she asked me to come to the Christmas. She does a big Christmas party every year, and I definitely did not want to see anyone at that point. So I remember coming home like the day after, and I had been seeing a therapist and like some other psychiatrist prior to this. So I was on meds and taking drugs, probably not taking the meds as prescribed, but they, I think, had given my mom some information about different treatments, centers. And I think at that point she was willing to try, something else. So I, fast forward, I got sent to this treatment center in Thailand. It's not the same as treatment in the US. And I was still 18 at the time. And so I don't think I really took it seriously. Like, I think I needed that break for sure. I was there for about 2 months, but I don't think I really understood what the disease I had. I still didn't understand addiction. For me, it was like, okay, I'm in this safe place for 2 months. My dad had taken me there. It was the first time I ever saw my dad cry, in my whole life, dropping me off at this rehab. And it was an interesting place. I think they only took like 6 to 8 clients at a time. Everybody was like way older than me. And I think that's what made it so hard for me to relate. I was like, wait, I didn't lose my home and I didn't lose my family, And so at this place, it was like a dry period for me. I was like, okay, let me get my shit together. Let me feel a little bit better. It was good in the sense that it planted the seed, I think, that like maybe there's like some other stuff going on, but I don't know how seriously like I took this. And I had not really been introduced to 12 steps yet. There was one counselor there who I'll never forget. His name was Nikki, and he was in recovery. And I think he could tell that I was a real one, even though I was young. And he had mentioned the 12 steps to me, but it wasn't a 12-step oriented treatment center or anything like that. And so, but I remember he planted that seed, and I remember him telling me, go look up meetings when you go home. And so it had already been planted. But fast forward, I kept relapsing. So I relapsed as soon as I got home. I actually went back to the same place, and I stayed there and also like volunteered. And then I relapsed again when I went home. And I think at that point too, my parents were like, okay, this is real now.
How quick were you to relapse when you got home? Was it pretty immediate?
Immediately.
Yeah. Just because of the comfort of the place and...
Yeah. And I think I was already preparing like, oh, I feel good now, like I'm healthier again. Like, I can go out, and that's what all my friends were doing, or acquaintances, and again, for me, it was like, oh, I don't want to sit at home and do nothing. Like, I want to go hang out with people. I had no direction in life at that time. It was just one big party in my head. So yeah, it was really quick. I think I was already like texting people as soon as I was landing, like, hey, I'm home. So yeah, very quick. And I think my parents in some way did try to like curb that, but they can only do so much, So after the second relapse, this was in around like June of 2020. I think they were done as well too. They were just like, this cannot continue to happen. We can't continue to send her and come back and it's like, I think my mom at some point said to me too, like, she wouldn't be surprised if she, got a phone call from the police saying they found me dead. Like, that's the point it got to, So they actually hired an interventionist in June of 2020. And I remember this because, again, I was back in my disease. I was running away from home all the time. They were trying to have, follow me.
2020 or 2010?
I mean, 2010.
Okay.
Thank you for correcting me.
Yeah.
It feels like, 2010.
Okay.
2010. June of 2010. That makes way more sense because 2020 was the pandemic. So June 2010, they hired an interventionist. He was a South African guy. And I remember like him coming to the house, and my mom was trying to stop me from leaving. I'm like in just like a t-shirt and like my underwear, running around the house trying to get away from this doctor, this interventionist guy, and my parents, just like running in circles. I had nowhere to go. I was done.
Yeah.
And I remember this could be a delusion, but like they were trying to get me to drink this. It was probably water, but in my head, I was like, they're trying to drug me. They're trying to sedate me.
Some potion, yeah.
I'm running around like, just trying to not, because I knew that, again, this was the end. I was done. And I remember that day, I was like trying to text this guy I was dating. There was always a guy that I was dating that was going to save the day. And my mom slapping the phone out of my hand because she knew like we can't have her continue to, do this. And I don't remember if it was this time or the previous time. I actually ended up in the hospital. And it might have been this time, or maybe it was the first time, but that's where it led me always. It was either going to be like get in trouble somehow with somebody, and they talk about this, right, in the program. Like there's only three things that happen to us if we don't get sober: jails, institutions, or death, and thank God in my story, I never ended up in jail. I probably should have on multiple occasions. I'm still here, but I've definitely been institutionalized a lot. So this place I went to in 2010, the interventionist, I finally agreed to go detox on this boat in Hong Kong, which again, where I don't know, I thought I could swim away. When I was on this boat, I was heavily sedated at the time. I think there was a big threat of like, she's going to run. And I do remember I was like, oh, I can just hop in the water and like swim.
Yeah.
Where am I going to swim to? So I'm detoxing on this boat. Everything's really hazy. The next thing I know, I'm being wheelchaired, onto a plane. And I'm going to South Africa with this doctor and like this other nurse. I still don't, it's very hazy. And then
Your parents weren't messing around.
They were not messing around at this point. And the next thing I remember is I'm being wheeled off, in a wheelchair into this car, and we're driving to this treatment center, and we're in South Africa. I'd never been to South Africa in my life, So I end up in South Africa at this treatment center. I don't see anything outside these four walls for like 30 days because you're just in this treatment center. And it was the World Cup, like the soccer was happening. So I remember the first 30 days in treatment, all I hear were these like vuvuzelas, like everybody's like cheering outside. And I'm just like freaking miserable in this treatment center. Like, what's happening?
Why can't you party, right?
Yeah, that was the reality. I was in this place. So I ended up in this treatment center in South Africa. I was in this like more locked, if you will, inpatient facility for about 30 to 45 days, had already found my like treatment boyfriend and was going to run away with him, all the things. But that place really changed my life. This was really, I think, the starting point of my journey into recovery. And I never, had any experience of living in South Africa. But I think by that time, this is the third time I'm going to treatment, I was like, okay, I got to do I got to maybe listen, or I got to do something different. Getting out of this place, like I'm literally like thousands of miles away from home. I know nobody here, it's not familiar at all. I would not know how to navigate my way around this place. So I think I finally started to like decide to like open my mind and listen. And it was pretty intense, like we'd have group therapy, individual therapy, we'd go to meetings at night. And that's where I was really introduced to the 12 steps or into 12-step programs. And I know 12 steps isn't for everybody. It's just part of my recovery, and I was resistant, honestly, for a long time. But it's really what works for me today. So I was introduced to 12 steps there, and I started to gain some momentum. I moved from that inpatient facility to more of like a structured, it was like a secondary treatment, I guess. And I was there for like a good 4 to 6 months. And it was a co-ed facility. And it really taught me, how to be a human again, because I think we are so far away from who we are and how to be humans, when we get into recovery. It really taught me about my behaviors. It really taught me about my disease. I did a lot of work when I was there. And I think I was finally like ready to admit some of the things I had done or I had been through. I was finally ready to open up, because I think there was the first time I saw other young people as well,
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, that I could relate to. And all the not all of them, but a lot of the counselors there were also in recovery. And I think that helped me, because the other therapists or psychiatrists I've had in the past, and there's nothing wrong with psychiatrists or therapists who aren't in recovery, but there was something different about having someone sit, opposite me and say, I know what you've been through, like I've been there. And to see that person and know like there's hope, right? That, okay, like if that person sitting across from me really gets it, like maybe I can open myself up, just a little bit. Like it took me a long time, but I started to, see other people. And I think a big part of this too was like being in those 12-step programs, was seeing other young people. Like I remember they have a tradition in South Africa where if it's someone's celebrating an anniversary or a birthday, they actually give their candle or however many candles they have to a newcomer. And this young guy, he's probably like, maybe younger than me. He gave me his candle and he's still sober today. Like we still know each other, which is crazy.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah, super cool. Like, yeah, just the connection still too, right? But I think that, and having other people around me that were younger or like around my age, I was like, okay, doesn't have to be the end of my life. Because I think as a young person too, I was between 18 to 20 at this time. Like you think your life is over when you can't drink. That's what everyone seems to be doing to have fun, right? And so for me, knowing that there were other young people out there going back to school or like having fun, like I remember we would go play beach volleyball on the weekends. That's not something I would ever do when I was drinking or using, but I started to have fun too. And I think I really thought, if I give up drugs and alcohol, what's my life going to be? It's going to be boring.
I was going to say, I'm just kind of like fast forwarding, and I'm sorry for doing this. Like, it's a bold step of you to go from, everything you've been through here to apply and get into USC.
Yes. Yeah.
That's like in my mind right now playing, I'm going, oh my, here you are in South Africa, your parents ship you off, fly you halfway around the world. And then, you're there for around, sounds like 6 to 8 months. And then, around that 20-year mark. And then I'm just sitting here, my mind's going, oh my God. And she applied and got into USC. I've been there a couple of times.
Around that too.
I've been there a couple of times, and that was a pretty good party school. So
yeah. So fast forward, I guess, I lived in South Africa for about 3 years. So altogether, I think I went through about like 9 months to a year of treatment, like all the way through living in a sober living, before I actually eventually moved out on my own. My mom was a big part of my journey. My parents actually ended up getting divorced in this whole time. So my mom's main focus was like, get Sophie healthy, help Sophie recover. And so she would fly back and forth, to South Africa to help me. She would live with me for a couple months at a time and go home. So I started university actually in South Africa. I had finally gotten to a place where I was ready to go back. I had about a year of sobriety by then. but it wasn't a normal college experience. I like lived by myself, went to my recovery meetings and just went to school for class and then came back. Like it wasn't the type of college experience that you would normally maybe have, if you will. So everything was going really well. Like I was thriving in my recovery. I started like working out again and being active. I really started to get my life back together and things were going really well. And I got an opportunity, a scholarship to come and study in the US. And I got to like apply to the different, a school that I wanted to go to. So I actually, with one of my best girlfriends who was in school with me in South Africa, we had applied to the UC system and she got into UC Berkeley and I got into UC Santa Barbara. And I didn't know anything about UCSB or anything about the States. So by this time, I have about 3 years sober, getting ready to go to UC Santa Barbara, call the school, tell them I'm in recovery. Like I did all the things, do you have meetings? Where can I live that's safe? Blah, 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 all the stuff. And I get to the US in 2012 and my mom comes out, helps me set up. And then, boom, I'm in another country. Nobody knows me. Nobody knows my story. Even though I worked a solid program in South Africa and I knew all the things, I knew where the meetings were in Santa Barbara because I had called. I was like, I need to make friends, and I'd gone to orientation. I'd gone to the International Students Welcome and I found some girls that I was like, oh, I can be friends with these people, and they were like, let's go to a bar. Let's go to the like one bar in Santa Barbara in Isla Vista because we're all 21. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm not going to drink. I can order. But I get there and it's like, everything goes out the window because I want to fit in. I want to be part of, and they don't need to know I'm an alcoholic or I'm in recovery. I'm just going to drink for this 3 months that I'm in Santa Barbara and I'll go back to South Africa like nothing happened. Like that's what I told myself. So fast forward, I obviously got straight back into my disease. But I think interestingly enough too, like I was just drinking. That's what I told myself. I wasn't using meth. So how bad could it be? But I was drinking alcoholically. I would be drinking before I go to class. I would start on Thursday and, go through the weekend. I would try not to drink through the week. Like it was classic, like alcoholism, And of course, the guy that I had met in Santa Barbara probably needs to be in this program too. We know how to find them. Yeah. So fast forward, I was in my addiction and I was not going back to South Africa to be sober, like I had found I was back in my disease and there was no going back. I was too ashamed to tell anybody. I'd actually gone to a couple meetings in Santa Barbara, a couple AA meetings, like still saying I was sober because I think, internally I was like, well, if I just show up to these things, like maybe that will make me feel better. I'm not sure. But so I lived this double life again. My parents in Hong Kong thought, oh, she's like at UC Santa Barbara having a great experience. Nothing's wrong. This is awesome. And then in like December, I think I called them and I said, I'm going to stay here. I love Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
Little did they know, I was like just getting, completely hammered every day. And then I had to figure out, how do I stay in the US? Like I'm having too much fun, back in my disease, found this person that like I was drinking with who, as I mentioned, probably needs to be sober if he's not already. So it was like, nobody was telling me like, don't do this. So yeah, fast forward, I couldn't actually transfer into the UC system. So I had to apply to like whatever other school out here. I don't think I really cared. I was like, how do I stay here? Yeah. So I applied to USC and I got in somehow. I don't know. I got into USC. I mean, my grades in South Africa were really good. And I think I did okay at UCSB. So I transferred in to the fall of 2013. Or maybe this was 2014. Anyway, all I know is I graduated in May of 2015. So 2013 was my junior year. And I was a junior transfer. I lived on the shitty side of USC,
What side is that?
the Vermont side, Vermont and Exposition side. I don't know. It's just a little more sketchy, but at 37th and Vermont, which is now, it's much better now, but it was sketchy. And it's funny because my sober living now is on the shitty side of USC, like where I used to get high, which is great. It's come full circle. But no, it's not that shitty anymore, but it was always referred to that. So,
well, yeah, I was going to say my friend's house, their or quadplex, they had cockroaches going around the place. So
yeah, some of the places you would think what's crazy is like USC is such a prestigious school.
Yeah.
And the surrounding area, they're just not, yeah. Anyway, I mean, my mom, I think driving up was like, are you sure you live here?
Yeah.
And I remember moving, I had found like a sublease to move into with this other Asian student. And I remember when we first like started hanging out as roommate, she always commented on like how many cigarettes I would be smoking. And I think she already kind of knew like something's going on here because I would stay up late all the time too. And so yeah, fast forward to my junior year at USC, it took me probably about 6 months while I was there to actually find meth. And I honestly don't even remember.
So you're still like, actively using, you're drinking a lot. I'm drinking looking for meth.
Yeah, I'm looking for meth. I try Adderall. I remember my roommate had Adderall and it was not doing anything for me. So I was, was already trying to find it. So yeah, so at some point I had found meth and had gotten back into it. And, I still had the boyfriend in Santa Barbara and all the lies just started crossing. I couldn't keep the lies going anymore at some point. I was spending shit tons of money on drugs and alcohol. I wasn't showing up really to class. My roommate, I stole from my roommate. I had to make amends for that. It escalated very quickly, probably within 4 or 5 months.
And how much, like, for people to like put in perspective, like how much are you spending like a month just on alcohol and drugs?
Oh my gosh.
If you had to take a guess.
I don't know. Like, I think as a college student, I don't know how much money I had, but I would say anywhere from like $2,000 to $5,000.
Wow. Yeah.
Because I remember always having to ask my dad for more money for rent, and he'd be like, "What? I just gave money for rent."
Yeah.
Just using that as an estimate because that's probably how much my rent was.
Sure.
I could burn through all of that.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I'm grateful for the relationship that I did have at the time because he caught me in all my lies. I was with a drug dealer one night and he answered my phone when my boyfriend at the time was calling. And so it all came out, what was happening. And I don't really think I was on the school's radar yet because I would, again, be able to do the bare minimum, like show up when you need to. But I think the crazy thing about being in college is like, it's so easy to fly under the radar. There's not that many like checks and balances that you can really be able to get away, I think, with a lot, unless you're like maybe part of the football team, for example. I only know this because we've worked with some football students now. But, if you're just like an average student, like you can really fly under the radar for a long time before the university ever catches on. And so thank God for this guy, he called my parents and said, I think something's going on with Sophie. And my mom knew from that moment, like she's relapsed, She flew out here. She came to look for me. I wasn't answering because, again, I knew I was done. I was busted. I tried to get her to stop from coming here. I tried to tell her, oh, this guy is lying to you. Like, how can you believe, like, I'm your daughter, why don't you believe me? But it was all out the window again. She got here and she had to look for me on campus. She even went to the campus center and said, like, do you know my daughter? And they're like, no, there's thousands of students here. But she's a drug addict. Like, she needs help.
Wow.
And so crazy thing happened where she told them my story, these people at the USC's campus center, and they were like, there's actually a resource for that. We just met with them. And this is, I do believe there's something bigger out there for sure that has been taking care of me, because in that moment, my mom was connected with the people who had this collegiate recovery program at USC. Of all the universities they'd ever started, USC was who they had first partnered with. So my mom got connected with these people, and eventually I answered my phone and I agreed to come meet, probably really reluctantly. And they helped me to get through. It was probably like right before finals of my junior year, but they helped me stay sober in that time and then get me to a treatment center, like right after I finished my last final. I think that was really my bottom. Like, I can still remember sitting in my apartment, my mom's sleeping in my room, I'm sleeping on the couch, or trying to sleep on the couch, and I'm literally smoking meth right there in the living room. Like, she could walk out of the bedroom at any minute. Yeah. But that's the point. Like, that's the image I have of that's where my life had gotten to, where I don't think I would even care if my mom walked out and saw, and it was so depressing. Like, I'm in this, just random place or apartment in LA. I have no friends, like I can't, my whole time at USC, I don't think I had a single like real friend, I'm completely alone. I'm completely like physically, emotionally, spiritually, like dead on the inside, And I think that was it. I had completely, messed up again, any relationships I had. And so I went to this treatment center in Orange County, this women's treatment center. And that's exactly what I needed. It's kind of ironic that like these all women's places is like probably what I needed, and really an emphasis of the work I do today too in my own private practice. But I'd never really been like good friends with women. I didn't have women in my life who I could look up to. I didn't have women in my life who I could relate to. And so this place called New Directions for Women, like they really transformed, my life. One of my best friends is from that treatment center, and we're both still sober today. It really gave me, my life back. And I think had I not been in an environment where it was safe enough to talk with amongst other women, again, who could relate to me, there were younger people there too, I don't think I would have really gotten it. They took us to a lot of 12-step meetings, and they also opened up this door to spirituality that I don't think I really had like in South Africa, and has now become a big part of my life today. Like the therapist I had there, she would do a lot of yoga and meditation with us. She took us to the Hare Krishna temple as well. So just kind of open up this world of spirituality, which has come full circle for me, because that's who my mom is. That's what my mom was brought up with. She tried to teach us yoga and meditation as kids, because that's part of her culture. Before I went to any treatment centers, we tried acupuncture. We tried these weird spiritual exorcism things. We tried herbs and, all different things. I'd never really been to doctors or on meds, because like my mom's tradition is to use natural remedies. So it was very interesting for me for that world to open up, because that's, as I mentioned, become a big part of my own journey today and who I am and what I practice with my clients today. So I stayed at this women's treatment center for about 45 days in between my junior, senior year. And then I moved into a sober living at USC. It was not part of, but it was right there at USC. And I thought it was going to be really lame to live in a sober living for my senior year, in all honesty. And I, say that with no shame now because I've told them a million times. But it was the best year of college for me because, I'd never had a college experience. This was the first time that I actually got to have a college experience. I actually got to have friends my age who, yes, we all struggle with substance use disorders, but that didn't have to be the end of our lives, right? We got to go to the parties. We got to go do all cool stuff, rock climbing, hiking, surfing, going to the beach, trips. We got to do all that stuff together. And we all understood what we were going through. And we all supported each other. I had to face SJACs, which is the judicial system, when I came back to school. And I had a deferred suspension for a whole year hanging over my head. But I got to do that. I got to face them sober. And I got to say, here's what I'm doing to change my life. Here's what I promised to do during my senior year so that I can graduate, And I don't think I could have done that without having those peers who were, not only trying to maintain their sobriety, but they were also having fun. I think that's a big part of it. We did not get sober to be squares, we got sober to get our life back and then to live our life, right? It wasn't meant to be boring. And I think there is this perception that you can't be sober and go to school, but that's not my belief. And that's not my experience. I was able to go back to school, have this support in place, and then graduate, and then go on to the master's. So, I'm really grateful for the program that was there for me. And, unfortunately in the pandemic, they had to close their sober livings, which gave me an opportunity and my co-founder, Liz, to continue the legacy of what I went through, really. And she's also a USC alum in recovery.
That's cool.
Yeah, we met working together at this other place. And so in December of 2020, we opened Academics Anonymous, which is a sober living for college students to, have a structured, sober environment to be able to go back to school, get their education, graduate, and still have a community of support of like-minded peers to get through that stuff and learn those life skills, learn those tools to be able to thrive, And so it really has come full circle for me, I graduated. So I got sober in 2014. So it's been 7 years, it's really come.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you for me where, I get to be part of these students' lives and I get to see the light bulb turn on for them. I get to help them with registering for classes. I get to take them surfing every week,
That sounds pretty awesome.
Yeah, stuff that people did for me, So I think a big part of this too, more than anything, is being of service. And being of service has been a big part of my journey, and a big part of recovery and 12-step programs is to be of service. And in this way, for me, it's continuing that legacy and providing a space for students who were just like me, to kind of continue that legacy and support that community. So I'm super grateful, that I have the opportunity to do that. I love the students that, we get to support. I love to, just really see them start to live their own life again. Cause it's just amazing when you see the light bulb turn on. And we have alumni, who graduated, and some graduated and moved out in May and have gone on and are, now working out in the world. And so it's really cool to just kind of be part of other people's journey,
That's amazing. You said you graduated in 2015?
I graduated with my bachelor's in 2015, and then I went back a year later to do my master's in social work. And then I graduated from my master's of social work in 2018. So,
wow.
Yeah. And really, since then, I have been working in substance use treatment. It has become my passion, my life, really, to support others in recovery. And I think part of me going back to do my master's was I knew I wanted to create a bigger impact, and so how could I do that? I love working one-on-one with people, of course, and I had the opportunity to, be the executive director of that other program, and really help them expand, nationwide to start other collegiate recovery programs and treatment programs across the country.
Are they still around, or did everything shut down?
So it just looks a little bit different. They had to close the housing portion, which is why we opened the housing portion. And they had to close many of their East Coast locations. The only outpatient center that's still operating is here in California.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really too bad, just because of the pandemic.
Because of the pandemic. Yeah. A lot changed. For.
That's really sad.
It is really sad. And, I think another piece, just coming back to collegiate recovery, is it still doesn't always seem like a priority for universities.
You would think especially now with what COVID has done to these, especially young kids, mental health and addiction and just how much it has risen, the use of it. You would think automatically, like, hello, the amount of binge drinking that's going on, and it's really, I look back at college. Oh, sorry, I was just gonna say I look back at college, and it's kind of like, kind of go, holy crap sometimes, because it's kind of like Thursday through Saturday night you're drinking, and then it's like freshman year you could go 4 days, so every year it was just like you had to take down a day, because like your body, just the wear and tear of it. And I think nationally, I think there has to be a shift around that, because one, it's like, of course you're going to have fun, but I think just the that whole perception of college, where it's just you go there for just a party, right, instead of actually learning real skills and what you're going to do after college, and specific skills. So I kind of look at it now, it's like, man, I could have gone to other schools where it's like they have a very specific education program, whether computers, etc. It's like it's after 14 whatever it is 13 years of graduating, it's like kind of like, it needs to change a little bit, that whole perception.
And I think universities are, I've noticed, starting to, well, especially with mental health, I think they're really ramping up services. But I think people still seem to put addiction in a different bucket. But addiction and substance use disorders are part of mental health, right? And I don't know why there's still this idea that it's separate.
It's so interesting, because like my brother, he, I would say it first came to mental health because he always mentioned he had a lot of thoughts in his mind, just constant, like million miles an hour. He was just going and couldn't stop him, or he couldn't slow him down. And, whatever prescription pills he took, or Xanax, because I suffer from anxiety. So when he took a Xanax, it's like, he told my parents, like, oh, it made him feel normal. Right. And so it's like you said, it's kind of like mental health can possibly, not all the time, but can lead to addiction, because you're trying, like a lot of times you hear people with addiction, it's like, oh, when I, kind of like you said, when you did meth the first time, it's like, it gave you this sense of confidence and normalcy and everything. Right. So it is, what is it are we trying to solve, and so I think, they're, like, to your point, I don't know why that is. I don't know why mental health, and just maybe it's because people don't want to deal with addiction. I don't know.
And it's a challenging one, right? Like, it's hard to explain. I do believe, substance use disorders and addiction do live on a continuum, right? But there is, for people like myself, like, we really cannot use or drink ever, because we will die, there is no cure. The only cure we have is really like working a recovery program, which includes multiple things, right? There's no one pill and you're cured. It's an ongoing, lifelong process. And I think that's what's so hard for people to wrap their heads around, that it doesn't ever go away. Like, you will you live with this forever, right?
And that's that's a thing that, people need to know because, for so long, it's like, especially my parents, they thought, after my brother got sober the first time, it was like, oh, he's done, right? He's clean. And, like maybe your parents went through that same thing where it's like, okay, she's been to therapy and,
Yeah.
she's doing well. And yeah, it's, I feel like that definition of addiction needs to get out more where, it's a chronic relapsing disease.
Absolutely.
And so we need to know, just like any other disease, it can, just like cancer, you go for your 6-month, checkup, right? Just to make sure everything's in check and it's not coming back. So.
Yeah, I love that. And, it's so interesting. Like, even if I think about my own journey, even with 3 years sober, knowing every tool in my toolbox, like I still relapsed, right? And it really was because I stopped doing some of the things that were helping me. I stopped going to meetings. I stopped calling my sponsor. I stopped whatever that may be for somebody, So today, like, that's really important with the people that I work with my sober living students, for myself. I need to, do these things on a daily basis to make sure, as you're saying, I'm staying, tuned up, really.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, tuned up. Yeah. So with your work in terms of, Addiction Anonymous and the sober living amongst like the USC family, I'm probably going to go on this just because of my brother dying from fentanyl and you being in LA and it's so prevalent, now on the West Coast, but in the southern parts as well. Does SC, do they do a good job of educating their students, or is it just kind of like, because I got to imagine the amount of money going around that place and the amount of pills you can buy, or, especially, fentanyl, cocaine being laced with fentanyl now and stuff, like it's a very scary time to be in college, it seems like.
I think we can always do more, and I think we can always do better. And when I was a student at SC, I don't remember really getting any education around, especially fentanyl, for example. I remember having to take like alcohol EDU at the beginning of the semester, which is like alcohol. It's super random. It's like they want to tell you like how many shots you should take. That's like normal. Like we're way past that, and it probably was like really innovative at some point, like 30 years ago, but it does not resonate today. You can literally like click through it and not have to read. So go back to your question, I think that addiction and substance use and binge drinking is not always a big enough priority, which is crazy, for the university for them to spend time on education or prevention or, like just recently, actually, one of the fraternities at USC is, in a lot of trouble for like date rape, for all sorts of things. And there's professors protesting, students protesting. And I can't remember what exactly USC said, but they're like, well, we're not getting rid of Greek life. And not to say that Greek life is the biggest problem, right? Like,
sure,
everybody drinks, sure.
Yeah.
But, there's
that culture.
Yeah, there is a certain stereotype and culture around Greek life, and there's got to be more being done, like I just think there needs to be more awareness. I know there are some programs like through USC Pharmacy where they give out Narcan, for example. But if you ask students on campus, do you know what Narcan is and how to use it? I don't know how many people would say yes,
Sure. It's probably a small percentage, I would imagine.
Yeah. So I absolutely do think there needs to be more emphasis on education, on prevention, on just providing like a space, to talk about some of this stuff too. Like, and why does it need to be so quiet? Like I went to guest lecture at the School of Social Work about 2 weeks ago, and the professor there told me that there were 3 overdoses on the weekend, but you don't hear about.
Holy shit!
Yeah,
no.
And so what's being done about
that's
that? Like,
yeah, I got to imagine, one, it's probably image. You don't want the LA Times or whatever coming out and saying, oh my gosh,
We have
there were three
enough
overdoses.
scandals at
Yeah,
SC.
yeah, right. Yeah. The college, that's the most ridiculous thing too. It's like, how does this thing get headlines? Like, we all know parents pay for kids to go to college. It's been going on for years. We all know it. But, when you hear 3 kids over, just in one weekend, what's happening at UCLA, what's happening to all the, colleges right there in LA, there's so many, or, up here in Oregon, you never hear those statistics. And that is something that is so vital, because when kids start hearing that, you're kind of going, okay, why? Because a lot of it too is it's not just about addiction anymore. It's maybe a kid is stressed out and buys a Xanax just to kick the nerves for a big final, whatever it may be, and it's laced with fentanyl, right? That's the thing, like you mentioned, it's like, why isn't that news that should be like an alert that goes to every single cell phone at USC saying, alert, there was 3 overdoses this weekend caused by, X, right? So that's crazy.
Yeah, it is. It's really scary. And I remember, even just 2 years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, when I was working for the other organization, a lot of my job was around collaborating with different university partners to get recovery and addiction on the agenda. And there was a time at USC when the drinking culture was part of the strategic plan in terms of how do we reduce, the drinking culture. And I just remember the types of conversations that I would have, even amongst administrators. A lot of them don't really fully understand. And it's not their fault, right? It's really not their fault. But there's still a lot of education that needs to be done as a whole system, And I think that's where it is sad to me, as somebody who is in recovery. We're just seen as one of those like minority populations, right? Like on a campus. But imagine how many students, right? If we really look at the statistics, they say that like 1 in 4 of adults between the age of 18 to 25 will struggle with a substance use disorder. And like, imagine how many students would actually have a better chance of getting through school if we had resources, if we just talked about it, if they could see that it was possible, And so I think that's the crazy part too, for me, where we do spend a lot of time talking about like addiction, but there's not enough emphasis on like recovery, and recovery is possible, right? And like, you don't have to wait till you're 50, 60 when you've lost your house, your family, your everything. Like, you can turn your life around today.
Yeah, and like I'm guilty of it in terms of it's kind of that shock factor of like 100,000 deaths, which is ridiculous, per year for drug overdoses. I mean, that's insane, but like it's that shock factor as well. I'm guilty of showing those statistics and stuff, which I think is vital, but also messaging with you is like the campaign for like Stories of Recovery is talking to people in recovery, after, I don't know, this is what, the 37th, 38th podcast. And then, people I've just run into, at different events and stuff. It's such a radical change that is very enlightening. I think a lot of it too, what I love is you touched on it, is, gratitude, service to others. And I think, it's like, imagine, how selfish people are during addiction. And then this massive radical change where it's like, you have to help others. And, and so that's what I for personally is, for this nonprofit, we want to highlight recovery, because again, it's amazing what you guys do. It really is.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think, to your point, it is important to talk about the statistics, right? Like, because that's the reality, like that's what we're facing. But I do also, as you mentioned, like the shift to like, look at the transformation, like look at what can happen. And I think that's where it's not as sexy as like the how many DUIs this person got, or for sure, but at the same time, it is shifting people's mindset into like, look at how much they've overcome to be in a place now where, as you mentioned, they can give back, or they can leave their own impact on the world. And I think that's kind of where my hope too is we focus on how, like these my sober living students, for example, let's celebrate them, right? Like, look at how much you've overcome to get to a point where now you get to like go out into the world and do whatever you do and pass it on, right? It's like super cool.
And I was going to say, I don't know how hard, I don't think people understand how hard it is to be sober in college.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big undertaking. I mean, I don't want to like take away from anyone who's, day-to-day life, it's all very, hard and stressful and stuff, but, being a young kid when you just, you're still, your frontal cortex is still developing and all that stuff. And it's very impressive. And, and again, like college is all you see in the news and stuff is, tailgating at football games and, all the big fun events. Right. And it's a big undertaking, and congratulations to those, students who are, sticking with it.
Right. And I think you touched right on it, right? Like, I think that's where a big part for us is providing that community for, maybe people aren't even in recovery, but like maybe they just don't want to drink to have fun, right? Like there is this whole other community of people that maybe just want to live a healthier, happier life, I think we're lucky in LA a little bit. I don't know how much in Oregon too, where, we're definitely a lot more into, being outside or living healthier lives, if you will. Like I do notice a lot of my friends here are, even if they're not in recovery, like, they go out, they work out, they take care of what they're eating. They're a little more conscious in that way. And so I think we're lucky that I'm lucky to live in this.
Well, I mean, LA is beautiful. It has, 75, 80 degrees year round, and you got the beaches and all that stuff. That's the hard part here in Oregon is, we Oregonians, we love to be outside. It's, usually early November until like end of March, where it's just dark and gray and drizzly. It's just that kind of like, man, it's, like I remember a couple of years ago, I went down to the, that lecture at USC. I was coming from rain and I saw the weather. It was like 70 degrees and sunny that weekend. And my buddy, he picks me up at the airport and he's dressed in jeans and a sweater. And he was wearing mittens that night when we went out to dinner. It was 68 degrees. I'm going, what? Like I'm in shorts and a shirt. I'm going, what is going on? Like this is the most amazing, it's so different, but
here.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, Sophie. Again, I appreciate your time and your whole story. That's just incredible. Like I still can't believe your parents just flew you off to South Africa. But then again, I also can't, going to Australia and, everywhere else, right? It's kind of a thing for just shipping you off, it sounds like.
Yeah, actually, funny enough, I was talking to my mom about this. LA is the one place I have remained for the longest time. So it's probably a good sign. But no, I mean, I think for them and for anybody, right? It's like go to any lengths. And so that was part of my journey. And I'm so grateful, that I got to experience treatment in other countries, recovery in other countries. I think that's the amazing thing too about recovery is like, I can go anywhere in the world and I know there's an AA meeting. Like we were.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, we were recently in Costa Rica or Nicaragua, one of the two. And we reached out to someone who was holding AA meetings there. And it's like you are immediately connected because of what you have with, and so it just feels good to know that you're never alone, really, wherever you go, right? Like there's always another alcoholic or addict in recovery who will get you. And I think that's for me as somebody who's been away from home as well for a long time, like, and who struggled, like I struggled with always feeling like I'm always by myself. I'm always in other places. Where are my people? Like today, I know I'm not alone. I know there's other people, right here in my community. It's funny, actually, the apartment complex I live in, there's only 1, 2, 3, 4. 3 out of 4 of us are in recovery.
No shit.
Right here. Yeah.
Right. It's amazing when you start talking about it, right?
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
So
that's amazing.
You never know. It could be your next bigger, right? Like,
Yeah. Sophie, again, thank you for your story. Thank you for all that you do down down in the LA region. You got a lot on your plate, it sounds like. So keep at it.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm happy. I think, this is my passion, and to give back and to share my story and to, hopefully leave an impact or at least help one person. That's what this is all about. And thank you, for everything that you're doing to bring recovery out of the shadows, to end the stigma around addiction. Like, I think it's important that I'm so grateful for this opportunity to talk about it with you. So thank you for providing that space.
No problem. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for listening to the Henry's Uncle podcast. Please like, subscribe, and leave us a review. If you would like to learn more about our nonprofit, please go to henrysuncle.org. As we say here at Henry's Uncle, you are loved, never judged.